This delightful little spot is called Wildboarclough. However, a local friend of mine has always pronounced it Wildbourclough, so I'm presuming that is the correct pronunciation. Anyway, it's from here in Wildbourclough that my walk for today starts. Wildbourclough claims to be where the last wild boar in England was killed. The village is now a quiet backwater in the upper reaches of Clough Brook, sandwiched between the uplands of Macclesfield Forest to the west and Danebower to the east. St Saviour's Church is an Anglican parish church built between 1901 and 1909 for the 16th Earl of Derby to celebrate the safe return of his sons from the Boer War. The building was carried out by workers from the Crag estate. The foundation stone was laid by the Countess of Derby in September 1901, and the church was consecrated in 1909. Crag Hall was built in 1815 by George Palfreyman, the owner of a carpet mill nearby, which used Clough Brook to power its machinery. Crag Hall is the private country retreat of the Earl and Countess of Derby. The bridge over Clough Brook bears a commemorative plaque to the flash flood of 1989, which drowned a motorist in his car here. From Wildbourclough, I follow the lane which runs along the valley of Clough Brook and headed northwards through Clough House. There are no footpaths along this route for quite some way, so I've just got to follow this lane for about a mile or so. A mile up the lane, I came to Dinger's Hollow Farm, beyond which was a footpath leading through fields. I turned off here and slowly headed away from the valley of Clough Brook. I could see more of the open views surrounding me as I continued. To my right, I could just make out the busy A537 Cat and Fiddle Road winding its way through the hills, and the Cat and Fiddle pub at the very top. My path led onto a lane again, which I climbed up a short way to the edge of Macclesfield Forest. Here I could see a memorial stone at the side of the lane. Opposite this memorial stone, I left the lane again, as I took a track heading in the direction of Shuttlingsloe. This track took me along the fringes of Macclesfield Forest, which comprises a number of plantations occupying the western slopes of the Peak District, overlooking the Cheshire Plain. It is just a small part of what, in the Middle Ages, was a large royal hunting forest, much of which would have been, as it is today, open moorland rather than thick woodland. I had some wonderful open views across Macclesfield Forest the further I walked, including a dramatic view of the bold crag known as Tegg's Nose. Further along, I could see a reservoir far below through the trees, and I would be seeing more of this later on in the day. Eventually I came to a junction of paths where I turned left to leave the forest and follow a flagged path across the open hillside. To my right, I could see the Sutton Common BT Tower, a 238-foot radio tower near Macclesfield. As my path briefly levelled, the distinctive peak of Shuttlingsloe came dramatically into view. From a distance, it is easy to see why it has been described as the Cheshire Matterhorn, for although only rising to 1,659 feet, its abrupt and distinctive peak bears a striking resemblance to its continental counterpart. I carried on along the flagged path, then on to the final pull to the summit. Upon reaching the summit, I stopped to take in the magnificent panorama. To the south are the Roaches, while to the east the ground rises above Wildboarclough to the bleak expanse of Axe Edge Moor. To the west, I could see the Sutton Common BT Tower, where the land falls away to the Cheshire Plain, while to the northwest, I could just make out the town of Macclesfield. Leaving the summit of Shutlingsloe, I took a rocky path dropping steeply down the craggy face. Having fairly short legs, I found it a bit of a scramble at first, but the gradient soon eased as the descent continued on the grass below. That was a very enjoyable climb to the summit of Shutlingsloe. I've never walked to the top before, so that's what's made it even nicer. Anyway, I'm making my way back down, back towards Wildboarclough and onto Clough House. Well, I'm back at Clough House, but I'm not quite finished. So what I'm going to do now is drive back into Macclesfield Forest and visit one of the locations that I could see from a distance earlier. I came to Trentabank Reservoir, which, as well as the surrounding woodland, is owned by United Utilities and supplies the town of Macclesfield with drinking water. Although a working environment, the area is a haven for wildlife. Perhaps best known for its heronry, the reserve is also home to ravens and birds of prey. Red deer are shy residents of the forest, but can often be seen drinking from the reservoir in early morning. Changing water levels occasionally expose the reservoir banks, which become a popular feeding ground for small wading birds, including common sandpipers, green sandpipers, and little ringed plovers. Flocks of crossbills are regularly seen feeding in the treetops, and winter visitors include golden eyes and goosanders. Just along from here is Ridgegate Reservoir, which, like Trentabank, supplies Macclesfield's water. Ridgegate is also home to Macclesfield's Fly Fishing Club. As I walked beside Ridgegate Reservoir, I had a much closer view of Teg's nose at this point. At the far end of the lake, I passed the Leathers Smithy pub. Unfortunately, as I was here on a weekday, the pub had closed at 3 o'clock that afternoon and wasn't due to open again until 7 that evening, so I was too early to enjoy a drink and a bite to eat. However, I still had a plan, so I headed on back towards Wildboarclough. At the end of the day, I was back in the valley of Clough Brook. A little north of here, just below the Cat and Fiddle Road, where the lane from Wildboarclough ends, I was in the hamlet of Bottom of the Oven. I've really enjoyed today's walk, and it's a corner of the Peak District that I don't visit as often as others, so I think that's been the main appeal of it today. So I'm going to finish off nicely with a meal in this wonderful Stanley Arms here at Bottom of the Oven. And indeed, I really enjoyed my meal inside the Stanley Arms. A lovely pub, friendly staff, and a beautiful location at the end of another wonderful walk here in the Peak District.